Ask Reddit. People who have met their online friends, what made you instantly regret it? She flew in town to be a bridesmaid in my wedding. And she decided to cheat on her husband with one of the groomsmen and blame me for that. Because it was my wedding, so that clearly makes it my fault she was unfaithful. He catfished me. Always bragged about how he lost a bunch of weight and then looked like the before pictures he posted. Not that I personally cared, but he got a lot of online attention from girls because of this. Also, he made fun of me for being poor, that is, having a beat-up car, eating cheap food, etc. What a douche. It was supposed to be a date. She had her hand on another guy's leg at the bar. I did a Grandpa Simpson at the burlesque. I invited him over to my house and he shat all over my toilet. Just to clarify, it was not in the toilet, it was on the seat and a bit of it landed on the floor. My friends and I met him playing League of Legends and turns out he only lived about an hour away. He insisted on being referred to by his in-game name when in person and made a big deal of it whenever someone called him by his real name. Do dating app people count? Because he told me he was a vampire within 10 minutes. I was 13 and had a 20-year-old pen pal in Hong Kong, both of us female. We met on Tumblr and emailed each other regularly. My parents were CC'd in all our correspondence, and we basically just talked about our cultures. About a year of us talking went by, and she said that her university allowed her to study abroad in Europe for a semester and she chose my country. Fun. I was excited. However, some time went by and our friendship kinda faded, to the point where I had forgotten she was even coming to my country. About 2 weeks before she was supposed to come, she emailed me that her student accommodation had to be cleaned out, so she couldn't access it on the night that she arrived. She needed a place to stay for one night. I asked my mom and she agreed to pick her up from the airport with me, and she could stay with us for one night. I mean, we trusted this girl. I was very open about my friendship with her, we had pictures and everything. So 2 weeks later, we pick her up from the airport. And we didn't click. She kinda annoyed me, but it was late and so we just went home. We get home and get her settled. We went up to my room, she gave me some presents and we chat a little bit. She says thanks for letting me stay here this semester. Huh? Excuse me? This semester? I asked her, like, what do you mean? You can stay here tonight. We can see each other during the weekends if you want to hang out, but you can't stay here. She goes quiet. We go to sleep. At this point I just wanted her to go away. And I got what I wanted. The next morning I wake up, and she's gone. I don't even know how she got out, because we lock the doors at night, but she just vanished. We have special locks that you need a key for to open, and the key was somewhere else in the house. Yes, I think this is a fire hazard. No, my mom can't be convinced it's unnecessary, her suitcase was still there. I tried calling her, she didn't pick up. She eventually texted me, asking if my mother could drop off her suitcase at a train station 40 minutes away at a certain time. My mother brought the suitcase, and that was that. Never seen her or spoken to her again after that. Met up with a friend I met in WoW. I fell down steps. Instead of helping or asking if I am okay, she laughed. Hard. Like, not breathing, on the floor. Gasping for air, seal clapping hard. We've been friends for like 8 years ever since that and she still reminds me. The fact the guy kept calling his exes crazy. He forgot I know several of his exes and they still are the least craziest people I know. I actually worked with this lady at the time. She was good looking and very flirtatious. Most importantly, we both played World of Warcraft. At its prime, she ended up inviting me to join her server and being a then horny 20-something, I of course, joined up. We played for a time and had a good PvP group going, her regulars. Of course she was still flirty with me in-game and I was back. All in group chat. Either way, we had some great times together slaying players in PvP. Summer comes and it's a company barbecue. I find out she is bringing one of our PvP partners to the event. Cool. It was her husband. A cop. I've been virtually sexting her in-game in front of him for 3 months. When I was 19, I jumped on a flight to meet a friend I had known for about 4 or 5 months. We both went through family bereavements and were a shoulder to cry on for each other, via the phone or internet, and we just decided to meet for a few days in a country between us. Until then everything had been perfect. She was the coolest girl, really smart, the kind of person you want to be around all the time. When we met things started great, but a day later she confessed, "You're not what I expected." What? 19-year-old and not very confident. This knocked me sideways. I don't know, just. You seem different. I never hid who I was before we met, was completely open, and it put a real sour taste on the rest of my time with her. Instead of chatting nonstop and watching Jackass on TV in the hotel at night, we went quiet and straight to sleep, ate in silence. I put as much effort as I could into it, but I still never got to the bottom of how I was different. We went our separate ways, text for a few days, then never spoke again. I have weird story about a lesbian I met online and eventually in real life. For reference, I'm a bi girl. We started talking after I made a comment on a lesbian forum about being a single lesbian mom. I still didn't know if I was bi or a lesbian at the time. We started messaging a lot. Hundreds of texts a day. This included sexting and trading nudes a lot too. But she was always obsessed with my daughter. Like almost demanding pictures of her and updates on her. Eventually we arranged to meet up. When we finally see each other in person, she looks shocked and asks where my daughter was. Being babysat by mom so we can have a date. I could tell this threw her off a bit. After our date we start hooking up at my place. Even then she was still asking about her. After this, can I meet her? Would you let me babysit? Do you think she'll start calling me mommy? I was like, chill, she's 1.5. This combined with her being obsessed with my daughter's stuff, including stealing a pacifier, a dirty onesie, going through the diaper pail. I decided this lady is crazy. She ended up stalking me for a while, but I was moving back in with my mom anyway, so I managed to escape. When I was 14, I had an online friend 2 states away who was 14. He and his mom took a trip to me, and the first thing we did when we saw Ecother was run full speed at one another. Our heads bounced off Ecother and I chipped my tooth and broke his braces. I'm pretty sure his front tooth was also loose and had to go to the dentist to fix it, lol. Edit, the video is down below if you wanna see it. And I've gotten this question a few times. We don't talk much at all anymore, but I would consider us friends still. We went to a convention and he drunkenly told me and my boyfriend that he wished we weren't together so he could sleep with me. It was very awkward, and he's lucky my boyfriend, now husband, is a patient man. Turns out my internet friend was a registered sex offender. He was a former high school teacher who was having sex with one of his 15-year-old students. I thought the guy seemed a bit odd. But when I saw the headline in the newspaper, a lot about his strange reclusive lifestyle started making sense. We are no longer friends. Not quite an instant regret, but there were 2 people I was meeting. Maisie and Maya, for the purpose of the story. We discussed meeting again, planned to have sleepovers, just generally have fun. The first day we met up went really well. We all had a good time. I thought it went brilliantly. Then a few weeks later I found out they were carrying out all the plans. Without me. They still have sleepovers to this day when Maya is back from uni and I'm just left out. I don't speak to either of them anymore. It hurt lol. Edit. For more context to make it worse, I'd met Maisie a few times before and it was fine. This all happened after I met Maya at the same time. A few months down the line Maya confessed she had a crush on me. Don't know if that played into it, but I had to travel to my country's capital for a surgery. After the surgery I couldn't move for 3 days, but the first day when I got up from the hospital bed, I obviously celebrated and told my online friends. They asked what hospital I was in. Long story short, they lived close and came to visit me. But hide until they find me. What do you regret? I regret meeting them in a wheelchair, not having showered, under heavy opioids. They were absolutely wonderful people, and I'll be seeing one of them in a few hours as she is visiting my hometown. When I realized they didn't want to just be friends, he got freakishly obsessive and possessive. Met online through a fandom. After a few years the fandom pretty much fell apart, but a handful of us stayed friends because we actually had a fair amount in common. D was very normal, the rest of the group seemed to love him. About 4 years after just being online mates we met in person. It went fine. We interacted a lot on FB and Instagram. I hit a really busy period in my life but managed to squeeze in a Christmas get-together at my place for my little group of friends including D. After that my online activity decreased drastically due to being busy, and when I managed to get on FB I noticed that most of the group were no longer friends with D. Weird, but whatever. I checked my messenger and saw message after message asking why I wasn't responding. What was I doing? Could we arrange a meet-up, etc.? I explained I was super busy and it was also coming up to the anniversary of my mum's death, so just give me some time and we'll see about meeting up another time. He said, oh yeah, I forgot about the anniversary, you can have that day but I expect a response after. F that, I blocked him, so he sent email after email after email asking me what is your effing problem, what the F do you think you're doing, etc. So I blocked his email too. After 3 very peaceful weeks there was a knock on my door. It was D and he had a 6-page letter detailing why we had to be friends. I shut the door, used an anonymous email thing to tell him if he contacted me again, showed up at my door I would call the police. Went on FB and told everyone, including the 2 remaining mutual friends, about it all, and could the mutuals not share anything about me, my life, and actively discourage him from attempting to make contact. The friends who had long since unfriended him started messaging me that they stopped talking to him because of how creepy he was being, and PMs about me always asking if they knew what I was doing, had I talked to them, was I seeing anyone, was I actually busy because he was convinced wasn't, etc. In return I told them how he'd been trying to convince me to stop being friends with them because according to him they were all sorts of horrible things and that they were incredibly jealous and hated how close he and I were. I assumed he was just bothered because they stopped talking to him, so was just making up a bunch of crap about these people who had always been perfectly nice to me. One incredibly weird occurrence just before this all happened was me telling a mutual on FB that I was heading to the aquarium in London with my daughter. Mutual friend was also in London that day with their daughter, and maybe we could grab a coffee, let the kids play in the park for a bit. I checked my messages later that evening and D was incredibly upset because he'd waited at Farringdon station exit for 2 hours so he could come to the aquarium too, and I didn't show up. We did not get off at that station, but one that was 2 stops after and closer to where we were going. I haven't heard a peep in over a year. He has apparently deleted his FB and Instagram and thankfully just disappeared. It was my uncle. I regret I haven't met them sooner. Audience, oh. I met my old friend on Roblox about 3 years ago, but he turned out to be like 40. We met in a lesbian group, had the same local area. Was instant regret as soon as I got back online. Thought the meeting was pretty normal and they were a really cool person I'd want to be friends with, which is how I felt about them before meeting too, but then came back to see they'd posted a lot, about 10 paragraph-long posts, about how every girl they meet is taken and how depressed and lonely they are, while we were out, starting around the moment I mentioned my girlfriend. Now I pay more attention to when people are on their phones during social outings, never know what they could be doing. I met a friend on here and we planned to travel together. We rendezvous at a city to start hitchhiking. I instantly regretted it because he seemed like he had no clue of what was happening and that made everything a bit annoying. That feeling lasted 2 days. And now I miss him very much and hope we could see each other again soon. Dude was wearing like half a fursuit. I just turned around and texted that something came up and I couldn't make it. Met a girl I really liked on WoW but she lived in another country. After a couple of vacations there it turned into a relationship. Made the decision to move and start a new life there with her. After living there for 4 months I slowly realized she was crazy as hell. Huge mood swings paired with a lot of aggression. Ended up getting stabbed in the side by her while asleep. Needless to say, after getting out of the hospital I took the first plane back home. She's still in a psychiatric hospital. Never actually met him but played Apex with a dude pretty regularly, almost every day. We finally exchanged info and then he used to call me repeatedly in depressed fits and bitch about how girls don't like him. It sucks cause I wanted to help but once it hit 36 calls in one day. I had to block. When I was in high school I met a guy from a different high school in a local chat room. We hit it off and after a few days we agreed to meet up at the store I worked at once I finished work. Well, I guess he showed up a little early, with a friend, and came through my check stand. I thought it was him, we'd swapped photos, but I was really shy and didn't want to be wrong. I waited for him to introduce himself, but he never did, and he and his friend paid for whatever they had and left without conversation. I was still hopeful it wasn't the guy, so I waited up for him for an hour after my shift. Of course, he never showed, because that absolutely was the guy. He must have been disappointed when he met me in the checkout line and instead of being a decent person and saying he wasn't interested, he just ghosted me. If I could go back in time, I definitely would have said something to him at the check stand. That's my one regret. Friend for 6 years flies over to Australia to hang with me for a month. Little did I know he was a bit taller than me. I was 5'10" inches. He was, well, 6'7" inches. I never knew he was this tall, he never talked about it, and when I was at the Brisbane airport waiting for him, I texted him stating I don't know where you are, to which he replied look up. Towering over everyone is this blonde guy that has the arm span of the airport lobby. I cried, we laughed, and I regret bringing him over because my ceiling almost hits his head. We met over a Dead by Daylight game. He was really charming, funny and nice. Then he fell in love with one girl of our gaming group and they started a long-distance relationship. He even flew in to meet her in person. Turns out he is an abusive, narcissistic asshole, who constantly belittled my friend. He gaslighted her and loved to play psycho games with our group. We stopped playing with him after a few weeks, because he was so toxic to our group. Sadly, my friend was in a bad place at that time and hadn't the heart to break up with him. Took her several months to finally do it. Fuck you, Bowl. I used to play Counter-Strike 1.6 with one of the funniest and most lively guys I've ever met. He was a linchpin for half a dozen other guys in a friendship group that he welcomed me into. They lived about 200 miles south of me in the south of England. For several years we talked and played games together. He would brighten my day. I've never loved a friend like I loved him. Before I met him I had no idea he was sick. Like. Really sick, he had muscular dystrophy, for which there is no cure and is a progressively debilitating disease. His form started by paralyzing his legs, and working its way up to his arms and eventually his lungs. It wasn't until a few days before I had arranged for my first ever trip down there that he told me about it. It didn't faze me in the slightest, it made me want to go see him even more. I only saw him in real life twice before he died about a year later. I regret that I couldn't go to his funeral. It was too far away and I couldn't make it. The person was a stalker. That'll do it. What gave it away? They said something I never told them about where I live. Somehow the person found my sister on Facebook and added her and found out the neighborhood where I lived. I didn't even give this person my sister's name. It was creepy. I personally don't use social media like Instagram or Facebook. I was playing LOL with this guy for over 1 year and we got along really well. We talked and played for hours every day and we shared a lot of thoughts and secrets. We never exchanged photos though. I started to like him very much and didn't care that I didn't have a photo of him, because young me thought if his looks changed your feelings it would mean you are very superficial. We made plans to meet up and he drove to my area in his car. His car was very small, which isn't a problem, but when he opened the door and this 400-pound dude got out it looked really silly. No kidding, the car was only marginally bigger than he was. I was kinda stunned, but carried on like everything was normal. I didn't want to act superficial after all. We hugged and he smelled just disgusting. The smell can only be described as a mixture of old sweat, smoke and clothes that didn't dry right away. Later that day he kissed me and I almost threw up. It was only my second kiss and I never had the pleasure to kiss a smoker before. It was a horrible experience. I still got into a relationship with him, because I thought at least he has this amazing personality. Oh boy, how wrong I was. He turned out to be an abusive boss. Edit, grammar. The lady was crazy. We met through an app that was advertised as a meet friends app and not a dating app. Well, turns out, it was a dating app. However, she put in her bio that she was married with 2 kids. I put that I was in a long-term relationship and looking for friends. By the way, I'm a guy. She wasn't. So when we arranged a meetup, her husband and 2 kids were there as well as my girlfriend. Everything was going great. Hung out a few times and added each other on Facebook. Turns out, she was super into the whole breastfeeding in public thing. Like, I get it. You go girl. But she was super obsessed with it. 4 out of every 5 pics she posted to FB was her boob in her kid's mouth. She got angry when you looked away when in public. Like, she wanted you to stare at her while she breastfed. Just got to the point that I was super uncomfortable with it and moved on. Met her after gaming with her for like 1.5 years. My parents allowed me to have her visit me for a weekend. Unbelievably beautiful girl, had a lot of deep talks on the phone, were frequently flirting quite hard and stuff. She kind of was my first love interest. We went out for a drink with a few friends of mine. Started hitting on my best friend the second she saw him. Didn't even pay attention to me the whole evening and the first thing she said the next morning was let's go to his place. That effing hurt. Edit, alright, a few things. That was 10 years ago, give or take. I've made similar experiences over and over until I learned how to be more precise and direct about my feelings, especially towards love interests. Today, I'm a self-confident guy in his mid-20s that is very secure around people, so I guess things worked out for me. I stopped contacting her after that, while my best friend actually stayed close for quite some years, proceeding to have some strange kind of friends with benefits, love affair type situation going on with her. I don't blame him. She was a gorgeous girl, even though it bothered me first. We are best friends still, while she has vanished into nothingness at some point. As many refer to my best friend as a bad friend for not respecting my interest in said girl, he didn't flirt with her that evening at all. It was one-sided, really. Everything that happened between the two of them was afterwards, after I quit contacting her. He asked me if I was okay with him keeping contact, and I was, since my interest had puffed out of existence at this very evening. Online friendship turned into online relationship. Online relationship turned into meeting in real life. Meeting in real life led into not working relationship. Not working relationship turned into breaking up and not talking to each other anymore.